The blood trickled down Thomas Quinn's fingers as he stared at the manila folder, cursing silently at the fresh paper cut that sliced across his index finger. It wasn't until he heard the collective gasp from the 23 alien students behind him that he realized this minor injury had become a classroom spectacle. "Professor Quinn, you are hemorrhaging," shouted Zax, a Nurian student with translucent blue skin and 4 eyes that were now wide with alarm. The alien's voice trembled with genuine concern as the entire xenobiology class surged forward from their lab stations. Thomas quickly grabbed a tissue from his desk and wrapped it around his finger, turning to face the class with a reassuring smile. "It's just a paper cut. Happens all the time." The aliens exchanged confused glances. Professor Quinn taught advanced human biology at the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Academy, the first educational institution built on Earth specifically to help integrate alien species into human society. He'd been working there for 3 years, but somehow paper cuts had never come up in the curriculum. Elrex, a Vespian with an exoskeleton that reminded Thomas of an iridescent praying mantis, stepped forward. His head-mounted translator flickered as he spoke. "Professor, your circulatory fluid is escaping your body. How can you remain so calm? On my planet, any breach of the exoskeleton requires immediate medical attention." Thomas unwrapped the tissue to show them the cut. The bleeding had already slowed to a thin red line. "Human bodies are remarkably adaptive. Our blood contains platelets that automatically begin clotting to stop the bleeding. See, it's already starting to heal." The aliens crowded closer, fascination replacing their initial horror. Quinn, a reptilian saurian, peered at the cut with compound eyes. "So fragile," Quinn commented. "Your skin tears from mere contact with processed wood pulp." "Yes, but it also heals quickly," Thomas replied. "Human skin regenerates completely every 27 days. Vix, a gaseous entity contained within a pressurized environmental suit, drifted forward. "Does this not cause you substantial pain, Professor Quinn?" Thomas shrugged. "It stings a bit, but it's not serious pain. Humans deal with minor injuries like this regularly." The classroom door slid open, and Ambassador Giel entered. The Argosian was the official representative of the Galactic Council and supervisor of the Academy. His tall, slender form and silver-gray skin made him look almost like a living statue. "I received an emergency alert from this classroom," Giel said, his deep voice resonating in the room. "Is everything well, Professor Quinn?" Before Thomas could answer, half the class started explaining at once. Giel raised a 6-fingered hand for silence. "A paper cut," Thomas explained, holding up his finger. "The students were concerned about the blood." Giel approached, examining Thomas's finger with narrowed eyes. "Fascinating. And you say this is common?" "Very. Paper edges can be surprisingly sharp." Giel turned to address the class. "This presents an excellent learning opportunity. I suggest we modify today's lesson to explore human wound response." Thomas hadn't planned on teaching about paper cuts, but he knew flexibility was essential when teaching alien students. "That's an excellent idea, Ambassador." For the next hour, Thomas explained the human healing process, from platelets and clotting to scab formation and new skin growth. The aliens took detailed notes, asking questions that ranged from insightful to slightly disturbing. "Could a human bleed to death from multiple paper cuts?" asked Zax. "Technically possible, but extremely unlikely," Thomas answered. "You'd need hundreds and the blood would clot before that became a real danger." "Is it true humans use their blood in mating rituals?" asked another student, a gelatinous being named Plorn. Thomas coughed. "No, that's definitely not true. Where did you hear that?" The human information network called Internet, Plorn replied. Ah, Thomas said, making a mental note to add a lesson on critical evaluation of online sources. Not everything on the Internet is accurate. After class, Thomas was gathering his materials when Ambassador Gill returned. Professor Quinn, this incident has highlighted a gap in our curriculum, Gill said. The Council believes we should establish a more comprehensive study of human injury response. Would you be willing to lead such an initiative? Thomas considered the request. I'd be happy to, but what exactly did you have in mind? A live demonstration series. Various common human injuries and healing processes documented for educational purposes. Thomas laughed, then realized Gill was serious. You want me to intentionally injure myself for alien students to observe, not just you. We would compensate volunteer subjects appropriately. The Council believes understanding human fragility and resilience is crucial for successful interspecies relations. Thomas rubbed his temple. Let me think about it, Ambassador. That evening, Thomas called his colleague and friend, Dr. Brenda Patterson, who taught human psychology at the Academy. They want you to do what? Brenda asked after he explained Gill's proposal, create a curriculum around human injuries. Gill seemed particularly interested in the paper cut incident. Well, it makes sense from their perspective, Brenda said. Most species in the Galactic Council have evolved with much more protective outer coverings. Exoskeletons, scales, carapaces. Our skin must seem bizarrely vulnerable to them. I suppose so, Thomas agreed, but I'm not sure how to create a program that's both educational and ethical. Why not turn it into a broader medical education initiative? Brenda suggested. Instead of focusing on injuries, you could teach alien medical personnel how to treat human patients. That would be valuable for interstellar hospitals. Thomas brightened at the idea. That's brilliant, Brenda. A human first aid and medical response program for alien practitioners. Exactly, and no one has to get intentionally hurt. The next day, Thomas presented his counter-proposal to Ambassador Gill. The Argosian listened attentively, his silver fingers steepled together. An intriguing alternative, Professor, Gill said when Thomas finished. However, I fear you misunderstood my intent. We are not interested in training alien doctors. We seek to understand human resilience. Your species' ability to withstand and recover from physical trauma is unprecedented in galactic records. Thomas frowned. I'm not sure I follow. Humans are the only known species that deliberately seeks out pain in certain contexts. You climb mountains, run marathons, eat chemicals that burn your sensory organs for pleasure. You call it spicy food. You voluntarily engage in activities that damage your bodies, then celebrate this damage. That's a rather simplistic view of human recreation. And yet, Gill continued, you can be incapacitated by minor ailments. A small virus can render you bedridden. A cut from paper causes concern. The contradiction fascinates us. Thomas felt a growing unease. Ambassador, what exactly is the Council's interest in human pain thresholds? Gill's expression remained neutral. Knowledge, Professor. Only knowledge. That evening, Thomas couldn't shake his discomfort about the conversation. He called Brenda again and asked to meet in person, away from the academy. They met at a small coffee shop in downtown New Seattle. The establishment catered to both humans and aliens, with specialized atmospheric bubbles for species with different breathing requirements. I think there's more to this research interest than Gill is admitting, Thomas said after explaining the conversation. Brenda sipped her latte. The timing is suspicious. Did you hear about the mining rights negotiation? No, what mining rights? The Council is in talks with Earth governments about establishing mining operations in the asteroid belt, but there's been pushback about working conditions. Earth unions are demanding the same safety standards that apply on Earth. Thomas considered this. And the Council wants to argue that humans can endure harsher conditions than other species. Exactly. If they can document that humans routinely handle pain that would incapacitate other species, they could make a case for species-appropriate safety standards. Thomas felt anger rising. They want to use my research to justify endangering human workers. It's just a theory, Brenda cautioned, but it fits the facts. Before Thomas could respond, a commotion erupted near the door. A human customer had accidentally bumped into a Vespian, causing the alien to spill its nutrient drink. The human was profusely apologizing, but the Vespian seemed distressed. "You damaged my sensory appendage." The Vespian clicked through its translator. Thomas recognized the alien as Elrex, his student. Thomas hurried over. "Elrex, are you all right?" The alien's compound eyes swiveled toward him. "Professor Quinn, this human struck me with significant force." The man looked bewildered. "I barely touched him. It was just a little bump." Thomas examined Elrex's arm. There was a small scratch on the exoskeleton, barely visible. "Elrex, this is a minor abrasion. It's not serious." "Not serious." Elrex's translator conveyed indignation. "This will take 3 full cycles to regenerate properly. I am experiencing discomfort." The human man looked to Thomas. "I said I was sorry. I offered to buy him another drink." Thomas had a sudden insight. "Elrex, remember our class discussion about paper cuts? This is similar. For this gentleman, bumping into you would cause about the same level of discomfort that you're feeling from the scratch." Elrex's antennae twitched. "Truly, you experience such sensitivity from casual contact. Different species, different pain thresholds," Thomas explained gently. "What feels minor to a human might be significant to a Vespian and vice versa." Elrex seemed to consider this. "I have much to learn about interspecies differences. I accept your explanation, Professor. And your apology," he added to the man. After Elrex left, Thomas returned to Brenda. "I think I just found my approach to Giel's research request." The next day, Thomas presented a new proposal to Ambassador Giel. Instead of focusing solely on human pain response, he suggested a comparative study of pain perception across species. The most valuable data would come from understanding the relative experiences of different species, Thomas argued. This would benefit not just mining operations but all interspecies workplaces and medical facilities. Giel's silver eyes narrowed slightly. "An interesting pivot, Professor. But this would require volunteers from multiple species. I've already spoken with several Academy students who are interested. They see the scientific value in such research." "Very well," Giel conceded. "Prepare your research protocol for Council review." Over the next few weeks, Thomas designed a comprehensive study. 20 volunteers from 10 different species, including humans, would participate in controlled tests measuring responses to various stimuli, temperature changes, pressure, minor abrasions similar to paper cuts, and more. Brenda helped design the psychological components, ensuring all tests were ethical and minimally invasive. The data would be compiled into the first ever interspecies pain response database. On the first day of testing, Thomas organized the lab with stations for each type of stimulus. The alien volunteers arrived punctually, eager to contribute to scientific understanding. Among them was Elrex, who had become increasingly interested in human biology since the coffee shop incident. "Today we begin a groundbreaking study," Thomas announced. For the first time, will create objective measurements of how different species experience similar stimuli. The first test involved temperature sensitivity. Each participant placed a limb or appendage on a pad that gradually changed temperature, instructing the researchers to stop when discomfort began. The results were immediately fascinating. Vespians like L. rex could tolerate extreme cold, but reacted strongly to even mild heat. Saurians showed the opposite pattern. Humans fell somewhere in the middle for both extremes. When they moved to the pressure sensitivity tests, the differences became even more pronounced. The gaseous VIX, contained within its environmental suit, registered sensitivity to the slightest pressure changes. The crystalline tholians could withstand enormous pressure without discomfort. Then came the test most relevant to the original paper: cut incident minor abrasions to the outer covering of each species. For ethical reasons, these were carefully controlled, using medical-grade instruments designed to create the smallest possible scratch. When it was Thomas's turn, he allowed a sterile edge to create a paper-cut-like scratch on his forearm. The alien observers watched in fascination as a thin line of blood appeared. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd rate this pain at about a 2, Thomas reported calmly. Noticeable but not particularly distressing. L. rex went next, receiving a similarly sized scratch on his exoskeleton. His reaction was immediate and dramatic. His entire body trembled and his translator emitted a high-pitched whine before producing words. "This is extreme." "At least 8 on your scale." The other participants showed equally varied responses. The gelatinous plorn barely registered the abrasion. The tholian crystalline being experienced what it described as resonance distress throughout its entire structure from a tiny scratch. By the end of the first day, one thing was clear: there was no universal standard for pain or discomfort. What was trivial to one species could be excruciating to another. Thomas compiled the preliminary data that evening, excited by the scientific implications. This research could revolutionize interspecies medicine and workplace safety standards. The following morning, he presented the initial findings to Ambassador Gill. The Argosian studied the data in silence for several minutes. "This is not what the Council anticipated," Gill finally said. "But it's far more valuable," Thomas countered. "Look at these variations. We can't apply a single standard across species. Each requires customized protocols based on their unique physiological responses." "The mining operation requirements would need to be species-specific," Thomas interrupted. "Humans shouldn't work in conditions that would be harmful to humans. Vespians shouldn't work in conditions harmful to Vespians, and so on." Gill's silver skin seemed to dim slightly. The Council hoped for a more economical solution. "Safety isn't about economy, Ambassador. It's about respect for all sentient life." The testing continued for 2 more weeks, generating mountains of valuable data. Thomas and his team documented precisely how each species responded to different types of stimuli, creating the first comprehensive cross-species discomfort index. On the final day of testing, Thomas gathered all participants for a debriefing session. "What we've learned here goes beyond scientific data," he told them. "We've discovered that pain is both universal and uniquely experienced. Every sentient being recognizes discomfort, but how we perceive it differs dramatically based on our evolutionary history and physical composition." L. rex raised a limb. "Professor Quinn, I have been contemplating the paper-cut incident that initiated this study. I believe I now understand why you responded with such casualness to what I perceived as a serious injury." "Oh," Thomas was curious about the Vespian's insight. "Humans evolved as persistence predators on a planet with significant environmental hazards. Your species needed to continue functioning despite minor injuries. My species evolved with exoskeletons that rarely breach except in life-threatening situations. Any breach signifies grave danger to a Vespian. Thomas nodded, impressed. That's an excellent evolutionary analysis, Elrex. Additionally, Elrex continued, I believe I better understand human recreational activities that involve physical discomfort. You seek these experiences precisely because your species evolved to push through pain barriers. That's actually quite insightful, Thomas admitted. After the session concluded, Ambassador Giel approached Thomas privately. The Council has reviewed your complete data set, Professor Quinn. It is not what was desired, but it is compelling. They have authorized me to inform you that the asteroid mining negotiations will proceed with species-specific safety standards. Thomas felt a surge of relief. That's excellent news, Ambassador. However, Giel added, the Council also wishes to continue this research under your direction. They propose establishing a permanent interspecies physiological response department at the Academy with you as its chair. Thomas was stunned. That's a significant promotion. Your approach to the research question was unexpected but ultimately more valuable than our original concept. The Council recognizes innovation, Professor Quinn. That evening, Thomas met Brenda at the same coffee shop to share the news. So you turned a paper cut into a department chairmanship, she said, clearly impressed. Not bad for a month's work. Thomas laughed. It wasn't about the promotion. This research is genuinely important. Think about the medical applications alone. Alien doctors will now have baseline data for treating human patients and vice versa. Plus, you saved countless human miners from working in dangerous conditions. That too, Thomas agreed. Though I'm still not sure Giel fully understands why that matters. Cultural differences, Brenda said. Just like pain perception, the Council species evolved in environments where collective needs often superseded individual safety. They're still learning that humans don't think that way. Thomas nodded, then winced as he picked up his coffee cup. A fresh paper cut on his thumb. He'd been handling research documents all day stung as it contacted the hot ceramic. Brenda noticed his expression. Another paper cut happens all the time, Thomas replied with a smile. But now, I understand why aliens find it so fascinating. 6 months later, the Interspecies Physiological Response Department had become one of the Academy's most prestigious programs. Thomas and his team had expanded their research beyond pain response to include other physiological processes, immune responses, healing rates, metabolic functions, and more. The asteroid mining operations were underway with strict species-specific safety protocols. Human miners worked alongside Vespians, Saurians, and other species, each in environments tailored to their particular needs. Thomas was reviewing new research proposals in his office when Elrex entered, now serving as his graduate assistant. Professor Quinn, I have been analyzing the latest data on healing rates, the Vespian said. Human skin regeneration following minor lacerations is remarkably efficient compared to most species. One of our evolutionary advantages, Thomas agreed. Though your exoskeleton provides much better protection in the first place. Different evolutionary solutions to similar problems, Elrex observed. That seems to be the pattern across all our research. It's why we need each other, Thomas said. Each species brings different strengths and perspectives. As if to demonstrate the point, Elrex carefully extracted a document from a folder and handed it to Thomas. The Council has approved funding for the expansion of our department to include a dedicated medical research facility. Thomas read the document, noting the substantial budget allocation. "This is impressive, L. Rex. With these resources, we can develop specific medical treatments for interspecies care." Indeed, no more universal approaches that fail to account for physiological differences. As Thomas set the document down, he felt the now familiar sting of a paper cut on his finger. A small drop of blood appeared on his skin. Elrex noticed immediately but didn't panic as he once would have. Instead, the alien reached into a drawer and produced a small adhesive bandage specifically designed for human skin. "Paper cuts," the Vespian said, offering the bandage. "Happens all the time to humans, but now we know how to properly treat them." Thomas accepted the bandage with a smile, realizing how far they'd come from that first day in the classroom. What had begun as a cultural misunderstanding had blossomed into genuine cross-species understanding. As he applied the bandage to his finger, Thomas reflected on the broader implications of their work. Beyond mining rights and medical protocols, they were building the foundation for true coexistence, a future where different species could live and work together, each respecting the unique needs and capabilities of the others. "You know, Elrex," Thomas said, "I think our next research project should focus on pleasure responses rather than pain. Understanding what brings comfort and joy to different species might be even more valuable than understanding what causes discomfort." Elrex's antennae twitched with interest. "A fascinating proposal, Professor. I will begin drafting research protocols immediately." As Elrex left the office, Thomas looked at his bandaged finger and smiled. From a simple paper cut to a comprehensive interspecies research program, sometimes the smallest injuries led to the greatest understanding. In the following years, the research pioneered by Thomas and his team transformed relations between humans and alien species throughout the galaxy. Medical facilities adopted species-specific treatment protocols. Workplaces implemented customized safety standards. Educational institutions incorporated physiological difference awareness into their curricula. And paper cuts, once a source of alien alarm, became recognized throughout the galaxy as a perfect example of how different bodies could experience the same stimulus in radically different ways, a small but meaningful reminder that understanding began with acknowledging difference. For Thomas Quinn, what had started as an ordinary day with an ordinary paper cut had ultimately changed the course of interstellar relations. He often thought about that moment when the blood had trickled down his finger and his alien students had gasped in horror. If he'd dismissed their concern instead of using it as a teaching opportunity, how different might things have been? As he walked through the expanded campus of the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Academy, 5 years after that fateful day, Thomas passed a monument recently erected in the central plaza. It depicted a human hand with a small cut on the index finger, alongside various appendages from other species. The inscription read, "Different bodies, different experiences, one community." Thomas smiled at the sight. Sometimes the most profound understandings began with the smallest wounds, and sometimes a paper cut was more than just a paper cut, it was the beginning of genuine interstellar empathy.